Training is training is training. It's a pretty simple concept. You've done your homework, you know how to periodize a training plan, you understand set and rep schemes and RPE and auto regulation, you've got all the latest tech and warm up tools, and you've somehow figured out how to fit all 482 things into a week, including recovery time and self care, mental health days, your biohacking. You've optimized. Congratulations. But now you have a climbing trip coming up. And the rock is different, the style is different, your pre-trip training time is short, and the number of days you'll have on your trip to climb, even shorter. And what's more, if you do your normal training block before this climbing trip, it'll overlap with the good days in your regular season at your home climbing area. And you want to optimize for both. Well, realistically, you just can't. What you can do, however, is learn the best way to train for a climbing trip, which is different than training for your normal home area climbing season. And you're going to do just that because you're watching Taped Tips from Power Company Climbing. Let's get into it. Now, preparing for climbing trips, particularly those less than a month long, requires a whole different training strategy than your normal seasonal preparation. Why, you ask? I mean, it's still just preparing to climb hard. Seems simple. Simple? Sure. But we have to take into account some things that aren't always present when preparing for your usual climbing season. And I've got 3 things that you can and should implement when you're considering training specifically for a short trip. Tip number 1, train and practice for the area. Now, most climbing areas have something specific about the style that makes them stand out. That's why you're going there. They reward climbers with a specific skill set or strength. For instance, Red River Gorge rewards open-handed endurance and pump management. Wild Iris rewards pocket strength and big pulling power. If you show up intensely understanding how to stand on small feet, that'll make for a much more successful trip. And being able to spot unconventional ways to position yourself between holds that are often facing the wrong way will undoubtedly help you in a 3-dimensional climbing area like Rifle. Even if we're talking strictly finger strength, there's a big difference between what's required to climb well at, say, Wild Iris versus Horsepins 40 or Waco Tanks or Red River Gorge. And it's not always just about getting stronger. If you're going somewhere for 2 weeks and you spend the whole time trying to understand some skill that you don't yet have, then you won't ever get to use your strength to its fullest anyway. Sometimes, simply practicing the requisite skills will go further than getting stronger. That gets lost pretty often when we talk about training. So we have to be creative. Let's use knee barring as an example. Adam Aldra famously talked about the workouts he did to get stronger at knee barring for his Flatanger routes. But that strength is only going to go so far if you can't find knee bars and don't really understand how to use them in the first place. So if you're going to Rifle or Waco Tanks or Jailhouse or Flatanger or any other knee bar intensive area, you can absolutely improve at finding and using knee bars before you go. And if you don't mind the strange looks, you can do that in the gym. Strap on a knee pad and start searching. Did it work? Why? Why not? Can you make the knee bar better? Can you let go with both hands? Can you rotate around the knee bar to reach holds that are higher rather than just using the knee bar to rest? Spending time playing with that requisite skill in the gym is going to better prepare you for when you get to your destination. And figuring out what's required of the climber at that destination, that's step one. And we've probably already done some of that work for you in our What, When, How to Train podcast series, where we talk with a local or experienced climber about their favorite climbing areas and how to prepare for climbing there. You can find those links in the description below. Tip number 2, hit the ground running. Now look, this is a short trip and you don't really have a lot of time to get used to the rock and used to the style and build some momentum. You want to be firing on all cylinders the moment you arrive. And the conventional build in volume or intensity followed by a deload week that we see in most programs is probably not going to be the best option for this type of preparation. For these short trips, I believe that it's far better to program a short build in volume, followed by a deload, then start a moderately high volume, high intensity block, and taper that volume toward the trip, keeping intensity high. Now, what you're training and practicing in those blocks depends entirely on the demands of your specific destination, the things we decided on in tip number 1. Now, the reason we build to a high volume, even for something like a bouldering trip, is because you're going to want to fit as much climbing in as you can. Even if you have a main project rather than planning a volume trip, you want as many quality attempts as possible to give you the best chance of success. I mean, there's nothing worse than figuring out that key piece of microbeta when you're too tired to give any more quality burns. Don't let that be you. And then we taper into the trip, even if it's an area like Red River Gorge where you'll want to be able to do hundreds of moves in a row because we want you to show up as fresh and ready to go as possible rather than being tired from your training. Now, you're not going to want to rest a few days in a new area in order to perform better. You're going to want to climb as soon as you get there, and we want you to be ready. In our new trip prep plans designed specifically for these types of short trips, we're using a 7-week program. 3 weeks of build followed by a deload, and then 3 weeks tapering into the departure date. And in my experience, it takes at least 6 weeks to really get some benefit. And anything longer than 7 or 8 weeks generally is going to risk cutting deep into the performance season that you're already in at the time when most people are planning these short trips to other areas. We're generally doing that to escape the shoulder seasons of our home areas. And if you want to learn more about our trip prep plans, we currently have programs for Wild Iris and Ten Sleep. Red River Gorge is coming very soon, and there are going to be more coming end of this year and next. Each of these has a version to fit 511, 512, and 513 goals, and you can find that link right there in the description as well. And plans for popular bouldering areas are also on the way. Waco, Chattanooga, coming soon. Tip number 3, introduce pressure into the training. In your normal season, in your home area, the pressure you're going to encounter is pretty minimal. Yes, of course, there's going to be an end to the season and we feel some pressure, but we know we can always try again next season. In fact, we often just plan for that. However, on a trip, the pressure can be much more palpable. You do enough of these trips and you will absolutely eventually be trying to change plane tickets just to get another attempt or two on the project you're so close to, or you're calling into work asking for a couple more days off so you can get those attempts in. And not only do we want to be able to handle that kind of pressure mentally, but we also want to be able to give good efforts while doing so. And we can improve this skill by adding time or number of attempt constraints into specific climbs in our training. If you know you're going to be doing a volume trip, trying to do lots of new climbs, then obviously we practice flashing and on-sighting in the gym. And of course, don't forget about second go sends. It's a really valuable skill to have for trips. And one of our most popular board meetings is all about the second go send, which is entirely different from trying to onsite and then just doing it second try. Whole different animal. So go listen to that episode. You know where the link is. And if it's a trip where you're trying to do harder things, we have a few time-constrained drills we like for that as well. My favorite is absolutely the 10-minute takedown. Now, I usually position these near the end of the warm-ups in a session. And the 10-minute takedown simply asks you to work out the moves and sequences, as much micro beta as you can for a challenging for you boulder over the course of 10 minutes. And then once that 10-minute timer goes off, then you rest for 2 minutes and give 1 attempt. If you don't send, 2 more minutes rest, 1 more attempt, and that's it. You walk away. Don't try it again. This is going to help you not only learn to deal with that sort of time constraint where you have to get things done pretty quickly. It'll begin to shorten the projecting process, forcing you to focus only on what's important for the send. But it's also going to give you the ability to give an acute effort. It's going to ask that of you, and you're going to have to deliver. And that's a skill that's absolutely necessary when you're trying to send hard things on trips. And if you want to get into the finer points of the 10-minute takedown, Nate has a great video on our YouTube channel that you should watch. That link is down there too. Now, I like to have some version of a pressurized drill through the entire plan. But it's most important in that last 3-week or so block to make sure that you're getting comfortable in that scenario where you might not send and you might have to walk away right before you leave. That way you show up ready, like we said. You'll get better at being able to apply the strength and the good movement that you've been working on, that you've been training for, even when that pressure is on. All right. If you've got a trip coming up in the next few months, consider using some of these tips to prepare and maybe just check out our trip prep plans if you're going to one of those areas. Each plan is developed by a coach who has considerable experience in that area. They include a resource library with both training and performance tips for that specific destination, as well as route recommendations or boulder recommendations, a podcast playlist that's been curated specifically for your trip, what to pack, and more. And of course, let us know in the comments below how your trip goes or what your top trip tips are. We want to hear all the spray about the successes, the failures, and the lessons learned. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, hit that like and notifications, and we will see you next time.